We're here today, obviously, to listen to Mauro Porcini, Chief Design Officer of PepsiCo, in conversation with Sonya Lennon. Today's event is part of the Creative Futures Academy, which is a government-funded initiative with our partners, NCAD and UCD, to ensure that the future creative skills of industry in Ireland, particularly the creative industries and enterprise-level organisations, are in place for the next generation. And we're delighted that the launch of the CFA concludes today with today's conversation. The programme of activities in the CFA will be published in January, and please engage with us then. I look forward to obviously meeting you after the conversation, and enjoy this morning. Before I finish, I would like to acknowledge all of the work of the staff and students on the BA Honours in Television and Film Production here in IADT. Today's event is live and broadcast and is being managed by all of our undergraduate students. So I would like to thank them for their work, not only today, but over the last couple of weeks in preparation of this. Enjoy the conversation and speak to you later.
Thank you so much for coming. Just before I introduce Mauro, for the purposes of time management, I used the gents today instead of the ladies just before I came on, and it's a great insight into the men of the future. And one piece of graffiti which showed great insight said that life is not all burritos and strippers. And another more inspiring one, which I am taking as a mantra for today, is my love is an army of autumn leaves. So I think we're okay. Mauro Porcini, thank you so much for being here today, for being at our disposal. There will be questions and answers. You'll give the questions, Mauro will give the answers, just for clarity.
I may have a few questions.
Indeed, indeed. Mauro is coming close to the end of a global book tour for this beautiful piece of writing, The Human Side of Innovation, The Power of People in Love with People. And many of you in the audience today are business owners or business leaders. So today's conversation is really important because this is the intersection of design and innovation and business growth, and where they come together in a beautiful unity. And from today's conversation, I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to start thinking about things in a different way. And isn't that the point, that we're constantly learning, constantly improving? Mauro, your career story, which is so well documented in this book, I think it's only fair to everybody in the audience to give an overview, a whistle stop through how you come to be sitting in IADT today.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for coming early in the morning here today. I don't take it for granted. I really appreciate it. I'm Italian, as you can hear from my accent. Even though I learned English in Dublin in 1998, I don't have a thick Irish accent, but I learned here because I studied French at school. And I'm a designer. I studied design at the Polytechnic of Milan, the University Polytechnic of Milan, and in 1998 I had the opportunity to come here at the NCAD for an exchange program. And again, this is where I learned English, but it's also where I learned the importance of changing perspective and diversity, and where I understood my own country in a completely different way just by getting out of my own country. The strengths of the culture, the gaps of the culture, therefore my strengths and my gaps in my own culture and myself. And I learned the importance of traveling and connecting with people that are different from ourselves, and again, changing point of views on life in general. So a very, very important year, 1998 for me, here in Dublin. I graduated at the Polytechnic the year after in wearable technology, so design applied to the world of wearable technologies. I started to work in Philips, 1 year there. Then I created my own agency, my own company, actually.
And by the way, sorry to cut across you, this is so whistle-stop. The richness of this story is extraordinary. I could intercept you at any point and ask you for more, so I really do recommend you get the book to get the full details. Please continue.
Because there are many, you read the book, so there are many different stories of, in this journey that somehow have been very important lessons in my life. As I'm sure, you have many stories in your own journey, in your own life, when you look back. But essentially, wearable technologies, Philips, then I created my own agency with an amazing person, big entrepreneur in the world of music that was intrigued and interested by the world of internet, and he's a guy that, without ever using the word innovation, taught me what innovation is by just observing him and seeing how he was acting and behaving. And then internet back then was just totally unstable. So the internet bubble collapsed, burst, and we closed the agency. Just recently, I realized that actually that was a failure. I mean, I opened a company and then I closed it. It was a failure, but I never saw that as a failure because I learned so much in those years. And then recently, a journalist, was asking me, can you tell us about, failures in life? And I have answers that I've been giving for many years. But then I paused. I was like, wow, that thing that I never saw as a failure, because for me it was like an amazing learning experience, was actually what a lot of people would call failure. For me, it was an experiment.
And we'll come back to that, because that is really indicative of a key piece around mindset for the innovation unicorn, but we will come to it. Please continue.
But long story short, I bumped into 3M, the tech company from Minnesota. I entered the company as a design coordinator at 27, and I left the company 10 years later as chief design officer, the first chief design officer of that corporation. I moved to the United States, and that's when I met PepsiCo.
So when you joined 3M, they didn't know that they were, employing a chief design officer at the time. But your passion to overstep the brief and to fill into a space really drove that trajectory.
Well, it's been somehow a theme of my life. Let's take 3M, that specific step. They gave me a job description. They were expecting something from me. And when I entered, instead of just doing that, I started to ask myself, what else can I really do for this company? What does this company need? I did something I know today, back then was totally intuitive, but something that usually the philosophers do. They ask why, and why again, and why again, until they arrive to the root cause. What did the company really need from design? And when you start to ask your questions like this, you realize eventually things that even the company or your business leader, your boss, doesn't understand. Simply because you bring in a different perspective. You know what you can offer. You know your background. I knew what design could offer to the company that eventually the company didn't understand yet. And so once you understand that, it's important you still deliver on the expectations of the company, else you don't last inside the organization. But then I started to work under the radar screen, on the side, on what the company really needed. One thing that I realized, for instance, in the first years, I met a person, a business leader, and he was sitting by me in the office, and we became friends. And the guy was assigned to Six Sigma in that period. So the high potential of the company for 2 years were assigned to the Six Sigma training, and then they would go back in the business with higher positions inside the organization. So the guy, his name is Maurizio. Maurizio and I became friends. He was witnessing what I was thinking and what I was trying to do. And he would tell me every day, oh, I can't wait to go back in a business position and work with you and change this company and leverage design. And so 6 months later, he gets back into a business position. He becomes the head of all the office business for Europe. And he doesn't use design at all. He doesn't engage at all. I'm like, and in a different situation, before the specific moment, I would have thought, like any designer often think, these business people don't get it, right? Another business person that doesn't get it. As often business People think, oh, designers, they're just creative and they don't understand, the strategies of the business. There is often that distance between different cultures. It happens in, cultures connected to your profession, but then this is true everywhere. When somebody is different from you, often we think that they just don't get it. But something happened in that occasion that changed completely everything for me. I was respecting that person. I was respecting Maurizio, not just as a human being, but his ability to understand what I was doing as a designer. So all of a sudden, something changed in the way I was looking at him, and instead of saying, well, he doesn't get it, I started to ask myself, what's going on? Why is not working with me? There must be something else here. And so the first thing I did, often we don't do, I talked to him. A respectful dialogue to better understand what was happening. And then I tried to put myself in his shoes. Empathy, another key word, another characteristic of these unicorns, these leaders I talk about in the book. And when you do something like this, two magic things can happen. The first one is that eventually you understand that you had blind spots, that you didn't understand something that by changing perspective, all of a sudden you see. And so at that point, you better yourself and you find ways to create a dialogue and together work, to succeed in what you are trying to do. The second scenario is that you realize that you are right anyway, but you learn how to talk to the person in a different way, using different kind of language and trying to get access to his mind in a different way. Even in that case, you end up creating a partnership and a collaboration.
But I think what was really interesting about that particular encounter or phase was that Maurizio had moved into a leadership role and suddenly had different imperatives and priorities in terms of his behavior that were bound by very tight targets. And the design philosophy and bringing that to business isn't a quick fix. And so suddenly he was looking to get the wins.
You read the book.
Of course I read the book.
But exactly that. I mean, in that case, I realized that I had blind spots. I realized everything you just described, and therefore, the big realization was that my role as a head of design of the company was not the one of driving Maurizio crazy because he was not embracing design. It was actually the one of working with HR to change, the way we were measuring performance of these business leaders, with the CEO or his boss to redefine the way the budgets were assigned, and a variety of other things. So my role as a head of design was the one of building the right processes and the right culture for the business leader to be enabled to leverage design. And now, it could be design. This applies to any other culture. When you try to change a way of working, to introduce something different inside an organization, often it's not enough to work just within the projects you are assigned to, with those specific people. You need to understand the entire context that is both cultural and then process and business model, the full ecosystem. So for any designer working in a company that doesn't embrace yet design, your role is not just the one of designing, products, brands, services, whatever they assign you to do. That's one dimension, but there is so much more. Because if you just do that, you're not going to last long.
And it's almost like a sort of a twin requirement of, the culture of innovation cannot exist without the cultural values that and I was telling you about Lift Ireland that we're rolling out to really instill these core values that you talk about throughout the book: respect, empathy, listening, accountability, all that good stuff. And that's a movement that's happening in Ireland, I'm very happy to say. But that innovation piece as a sort of a hard sort of drive can't exist without the human piece.
Yeah. Look, you go to school, they teach you a series of technical skills. You enter these companies and they tell you that there are processes and ways of working and different tools. You hire innovation firms, design firms, and agencies of any kind, and they come in and they tell you about their methodologies and ways of working. And so that's what I was thinking was necessary to introduce design thinking, innovation, in 3M at the beginning. So I start to do all of this, and we start to run dozens of projects and then hundreds of projects. And then I look back and I see that many were working very well and they were succeeding in market, and many others were failing miserably, eventually not even reaching the market. And so I was like, okay, there must be something that is really not working. I need to tweak those processes. I need eventually to call different design firms or innovation firms. And once again, some were working and some were not. And then at a certain point, I realized the obvious. The fact that the difference was always made by the people assigned to those projects, those tools, those methodologies, and yet we focus so much on the tools and the methodologies. We talk about design thinking, and there are business leaders and CEOs around the world that organize workshop of design thinking, 1 week workshop for the entire organization, and then they hire multi-million-dollar firm to come in and tell you about the double diamond process of design thinking, diverging and converging. And you think at a certain point that, wow, I'm embracing design thinking in my organization, that's the way to do it. Then when that methodology fails, when you don't deliver what you are expecting to deliver through the methodology, you blame the methodology. You blame design thinking. I tried design thinking and it didn't work out. Design thinking is like a brush. Put that brush in the hands of Picasso, put that brush in the hands of your tax accountants, assuming that your tax accountant is not the son of Picasso. The results will be very different. And yet, we blame the brush for not producing the masterpiece of Picasso. And so again, I realized more than 15 years ago how important it was the human factor behind it. And I tried to be more strategic in the way I was managing the human factor. So I wrote a list of characteristics of these people, these human beings, that in my little experience back then seemed really, really important. And I gave it to HR, to talent acquisition, to our recruiters, and we have been using those filters now for many, many years. I published the list, the very early list in a paper for the Design Management Institute review. And over the past 15 years, I've been validating and tweaking and pressure testing the list. And there are many, many different characteristics. Some are more obvious than others. For instance, the ability to dream, to think big. We are all born with that ability. As children, we dream, we fantasize. And then society try to stop us, try to normalize us. They tell us that dreaming is childish, right? How many times, that's childish, naive. But yet we preserve that ability, in college, in university, we go to work in these companies and we still think that we can change these companies, that we can change that industry, the product category. And then they tell us, no, you can't, this is just so childish. Actually, sometimes they tell us how arrogant you are, that you think you can change anything. This industry has been like this for years and years. This product has been like this for years. And in this company, there are so many amazing people. Why you think that you can change anything? And so you think you are wrong, that you should stop dreaming, because dreaming actually is not very practical, is not good in the business world. So most of us stop dreaming. Some of us, the one with some genetic deviation, keep dreaming.
Hands up the dreamers!
We keep dreaming. But the problem is that even dreaming is not enough. I met many dreamers in my life that were just very comfortable in the comfort zone of dreaming. You need also to make things happen, to execute. And you need to understand that to take compromises and trade-offs is fine as far as you are taking them as a step towards your dream. So, and so many dreamers think that by making things happen and taking those trade-offs, you are betraying the integrity of the dream. In reality, you're moving towards that dream.
It's iterative, though, as well, right?
Exactly.
No dream exactly happens the way you think it's going to happen. I'm going to bring you back to PepsiCo.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Bring me back. But these were the obvious ones. Then we'll talk about the less obvious ones.
Okay, very good. So in 2012, you had a big change in your career.
Yeah. I joined PepsiCo. I met Indra Nooyi, the CEO of the company back then. And it's been the beginning of a fascinating journey. I remember the interview with her, actually. The interview, I entered the room in Purchase, 1 hour outside of New York, her office, and she had a dossier like this on me. You know, it was always like this. When she was interviewing people or anything she was doing, she always had a lot of documentation of that activity, of that person. So she knew everything about what I did as a designer. Actually, I joke, she knew probably more about my life than myself. and so we ended up very quickly to talk not about how to design products and brands in PepsiCo, but about what was going to be my plan and my vision of how to redesign culture. It was part of a speech I was already, giving while I was in 3M. And I understood, before entering the room, I studied a little bit Indra and what she was going through. And she was essentially in a journey to change the culture of the company, making the company more global, introducing all the world of nutrition and health and wellness, the idea of performance with purpose. So it was a cultural change. And is in a completely different way is the change I went through in 3M in all these years. In all those years. And so I share with her the 5 phases that any change of culture goes through on the base of my experience changing the design innovation culture of 3M. And so the first phase is what I call the denial, when the company doesn't understand that you need to change anything and reject any kind of change. But usually, sooner or later, a CEO or a business leader understand that you need to drive that change. When that happens, they try to insert something, a catalyst, to activate that change. Often it is a person or is a team. So in the case of 3M, for instance, from Minnesota, they decided to hire a kid in Italy to start this change in the consumer business that was one of the 6 businesses of the company just in the European market. So a very, very safe bet. If I was making any mistake, I was failing, nobody would have even realized, And it was 20 years ago. So here they are, they hire me, I take my suitcase, I go to Minnesota, and I start to meet all these business leaders. And I pitch my vision for design. And everybody's super excited. They're like, wow, yes, we need to do it. And so I'm super excited too. I go to the office of my executive sponsor, the EVP of the consumer business, Dr. Mo Nosari, and I tell Mo, everybody is embracing this vision of design. It's going to be so much easier to change the culture of the company. And Mo, that is always very serious, that day was particularly serious, looks at me and he says, they're all lying to you. Mo, no, I tell you, I was there and I could feel the people, I could feel the room. And Mo goes on, he's like, no, I'm telling you that they're all lying to you. And then he goes on with an analogy explaining what he meant. He told me, imagine you are in an art gallery, you have a beautiful painting in front of you, and you have a lot of money in your pockets. What do? You buy the painting. Now, Mauro, you and design, you are a painting in the 3M art gallery. But there are many other paintings. There is the next HR project, the investment in the plant. So all the business leaders are buying other paintings. They're not buying you. And I know because I give them the budgets. I know how much money they have, and they have a lot of money, and they could buy the 3M design painting, but they're not buying it. That was a big aha moment that really changed, one of the things that changed my professional life. Because after that, first of all, I realized that he was right. People, they don't really lie to you, but what happened is that, first of all, they don't want eventually to disappoint you when they see all the enthusiasm that you have. They want to be nice to you, not kind, because if they were kind, they will tell you the truth, but nice. Or eventually, they are afraid of your sponsor. They're not going to tell you, that are against it because they know that you have a Mo Nosari, a CEO or a business leader behind you. Or eventually, they do try to send you weak signals with words and body language on the fact that they don't really buy into what you're saying. But we as human beings, we love to be loved. We don't like to think that people don't like what we're saying. So most of the time, we're blind to those kind of signals. So when that happened, I developed a very simple technique. Every time I pitch an idea, I ask the person in front of me for a commitment. I ask them for money, people, investments. You need to be with me. And usually they drop off. Usually they tell you, oh, yeah, no, I really love what you're saying. But now, there are other priorities, but in few months, we'll work together. And that's fine. I need to find that one person out of 10, statistically is the 10% of people.
Get the quick nose.
Yes, exactly. Get out of the way if you don't believe in it.
Yeah.
And I need to find what I call the co-conspirators. So the second phase is what I call the hidden rejection. And it's key. I think it's the reason why Indra Nooyi decided to hire an industrial designer working in a tech company for a CPG company, very focused on the world of branding. Because she understood that she needed somebody to help her redesign the culture of the organization, in the case, in the world of design. But anyway, when you find these co-conspirators, you move to what I call the third phase, is what I call the occasional leap of faith. It's these people that are willing to do things differently with you, and with them you build proof points. The proof points, they don't need to be perfect, but they need to be fast. So showing incremental value, showing that you're moving things, showing that you are bringing that value to the company, so that more people come to you and they're like, okay, I want to invest in this. The more people you get, the more you start to build critical mass of successes of any kind, showing just value, then you're ready for the fourth phase. Is when the company is like, okay, this is not just a fad, this is not just something happening now and disappearing in a few months. This is something we want to scale up. And at that point, you start a completely different kind of game, because the level of risk increase exponentially, the level of investments, and you need to move from the love and intuition of these pioneers, entrepreneurs changing the game, to processes and scale, and that's the problem. Most of the time, those processes and scale kill the love and intuition and entrepreneurship and the proactiveness and the sense of ownership. And so this is what you need to protect in this fourth phase that I call the quest for confidence. When you do it, you move to the holistic awareness that when the new culture is totally integrated inside the genetic code of the company.
So talk to me then about, the very concept of innovation and the necessary requirements once you get to that fifth phase and you know that you have this kind of wholesale buy-in. What needs to happen to ensure that you're making the right decisions?
Well, in the design world, we use three lenses. The first is desirability, viability, and feasibility. Starting with that desirability. I mean, everything is around what people need, want, desire, not just today, but especially in the future. And this is, that ability to dream.
People aren't great at knowing what they want in the future, though, right?
Exactly. So it's all about observation, being a sort of ethnographer, anthropologist, empathy, intuition, and also experimenting. I mean, you may have an idea of what that future could look like, and then you start to prototype towards the future. We'll get back in a second, but going back to, the three lenses, the first one is people, human beings, desirability. The second one is, well, when I understand what eventually people may want, I need to make sure that I can make it happen. Is all the technology, the manufacturing processes, the feasibility of what you're considering. And then there is the third dimension, that is the viability. It's the business model, but it's also the culture of your organization and a variety of other things. Now, if you study design, they teach you essentially the desirability dimension. They teach you to observe people, understand their needs and wants, and create solutions for them. And this is what satisfies a designer, what makes a designer happy, what gives us the possibility to grow in a company, to brag with our friends, when you create something that adds value to the life of people. Let me be a little bit provocative for the non-designers in the audience. When you study business, what do you study? You study to grow a business from A to B. And then they tell you, by the way, there is a lever called product that you can use to grow that business. But you have also other levers. You have promotion, you have distribution, you have pricing, you have so many different levers. So you can grow a business, being a business star, and do amazing things just by using some of the levers, even if you have a product that is mediocre. Or at least that was the case in the past. That was the case in a past where eventually your product was good at the beginning, but then over time, was not that good anymore because the world around you is changing, needs are changing, but you are established, you have scale of production, distribution, communication. There is a dynamic balance eventually between you and other competitors in an industry, so that's the industry that you play in, and you don't need eventually to create better products that create better value for people, because this is just the dynamic balance of the industry, and is the most profitable way to operate in an industry. But today, things are completely different.
So we're seeing a tension between business and design, perhaps, and certainly in the education that, you know, the business development is kind of at the core and design is an add-on, and in design is at the core and business is an add-on, perhaps. So what, in your opinion, is the design education of the future? Because we talk about polymaths and polyglots and this kind of breadth of understanding of a multiplicity of context for the designer and the innovator. What needs to happen?
Well, I think design and business are more and more blurred into one capability, into one profile of leaders, of innovators in general. The division I just described made sense, or anyway, was working until a few years ago. Now things are changing completely. The key driver of this change is the fact that today, any of us, any of you here in this room today, can come up with an idea, get easy access to funding, either through sites like Kickstarter.com or through the proliferation of investment funds and incubators and foundations of any kind looking for the next big idea to create the next startup. Actually, many college students today, they get out of school and they don't dream anymore to join a big company. They dream to build a startup, eventually to sell to a big company, to become the next big company. So there is that kind of culture. To have a big idea and think you can build a startup is plausible. It's not crazy anymore. The cost of manufacturing is going down, driven by globalization and new technologies. You can go straight to your end users in the most of the industries through e-commerce and social media to sell them stuff and communicate what you are promoting, what you are creating. So all of this is changing completely the competitive scenario. And so those companies that eventually in the past were having big barriers to entry, made of the scale of production, communication, and distribution I was talking about earlier, well, those barriers are not there anymore. They're crumbling down under, the winds of all these different things happening. And so because of this, they need to excel. I call this age the age of excellence. They need to create something extraordinary, excellent, in every dimension. You may have a great product, a great brand, but the service is not good enough. Well, the startup will enter exactly there. Or maybe you have a great service, but the product is not sustainable enough, or is not the brand is not purposeful enough. Well, that's exactly where they will enter. Look at what happened with Uber in transportation, Airbnb in hospitality, and this is happening in so many industries, and if it's not happening yet in your industry, it will in the future. So you need to refocus everything you do on the human being. You need to build a culture not just of designers. Designers have this culture because this is what you learn at school. But you need any other profession, the business organizations, R&D, any other profession, to first care about the people you serve. Be driven by thinking, okay, my business is just a platform to do good, to create something valuable for people. By the way, when I say do good, I'm not talking about solving, the problems of the world. It could be just you're doing good is adding fun in the life of people through your products. I'm talking about adding some form of value into the life of people. And not being happy if you have a mediocre product and you could do more, but you have that mediocre product or solution that is mediocre just because it's the most profitable way to drive that. Again, it was profitable in the past. Today it may be profitable in the short term, but sooner or later somebody will arrive and will make your product disappear, not just less profitable, eventually disappear if you don't act.
I love that concept of entering into the age of excellence, because I think we'll all agree from an Irish perspective there has been a culture of it'll do. And I think moving to this kind of elevated state where we have no choice but to be excellent. And the great thing about excellence is it's magnetic, right? So all the issues around culture and staff retention and all of that kind of stuff kind of disappear if excellence is at the core of everything.
And by the way, just because we may have people right now thinking, and this is something, a blind spot that I had when I was talking about excellence, but at a certain point a journalist told me, wow, I mean, do you mean that if you're not excellent, then you're not gonna succeed in any formal way, or there's no space for you in companies if you're not excellent? Or the excellence I talk about is attention. You don't need to be excellent by definition, but you need to see life.
Organizational excellence, and
yeah,
everybody
but
has
also
a part.
His mindset
Yeah.
before anything else, and is the mindset of somebody that see excellence. First of all, excellence, the perfect excellence doesn't exist. The unicorns I talk about in the book, they don't exist. You know, these unicorns are these ideal innovators. They have 24 different characteristics. They do not exist. Or actually, Plato will tell us they do exist in the world of ideas, up there. So the point of this excellence I talk about is the idea that you see life as a never-ending opportunity to learn and to better yourself. That's the excellence I talk about, this tension.
So we will come to the unicorns and this kind of recruitment blueprint for unicorns is in the book. It's really detailed, and it's worth buying the book for that alone, as well as everything else. So we have these really lofty goals, you know. We have dreams, we have ideals, we have excellence. But you know, the reality of the cut and thrust of business doesn't always provide a friendly environment for these ideals. And you know, I know questions are going to come up about sustainability, and I know you love answering them. So, you know, we look at, say, PepsiCo's commitment to eradicate virgin plastic, which had to be rolled back because of supply chain issues. How do you deal with the cold, hard realities of external contexts that you can't control?
Well, I think it's the reality of life, right? This is why we call them dream, else they would be just plans, you know, you just execute them. And so the dream implies somehow a difficulty, some element that make them hard to realize. But that's the beauty of the dream, the excitement. I mean, personally, I always try to set a goal that has some form of unfeasibility. Because the challenge is how to transform something that was considered unfeasible in something that you can actually make happen. I think it was Alberto Alessi, you know, the Italian kitchenware brand Alessi. They used to say that innovation is something that navigates at the edge between the feasible and the unfeasible. It's our role to move things, you know, towards the feasibility more and more and more. This is the progress of humanity and life. So for me, those challenges are not something that I see in a negative way, but actually are the beauty of what we do and the nature of what we do. The moment I don't have a challenge anymore, I'm gonna
give
look
up
for other. No, well, again, my life is gonna be over because I need those challenges. I'm gonna look for challenges. I was talking about those 5 phases. I usually say, you know, I don't want to arrive to the holistic awareness, because as soon as I'm close to that, I'm gonna set another goal with another set of challenges, because that what is giving me excitement in life. But it's not just about, you know, a personal preference. Simon Sinek, the writer, the author, the speaker, Simon Sinek. If you don't know him, follow him in
I think they
social
probably all
media.
know
He's
him.
pretty renowned. In his latest book, I think it's called The Infinite Game, something like this. He talks about 2 sets of companies. The ones that set a goal, and they arrive to the goal, and they're like, okay, I succeeded. I got there, and now I'm going to extract as much value, financial value, out of that. There are others instead that have this culture of never-ending, you know, achievements and new goals and setting new goals and feeling like you're never done, because there is always something more that you do. This is how the innovators think. And how the most successful companies think as well. Instead of thinking, okay, I did it, now I'm gonna stabilize and extract value. By the way, it was working for many years because as I said earlier, competition was more stable, more controllable, and there was that dynamic balance. But today, it's totally democratized, it's open, and so you need a kind of mindset to keep evolving and improving.
It's fascinating talking to you, and I know that there is so much to cover. I want to touch on the attributes of the unicorn. And so the unicorn is kind of an elevation of designer and innovator into this kind of perfect state, this concept of all the behaviors and mindset that creates ultimate possibility. What does that look like to you?
Well, I mentioned earlier some of the more obvious characteristics, like the ability to dream and make things happen. There are a variety that are less obvious. But in the past 20 plus years of experience building teams, hiring hundreds of people in different parts of the world, and then looking how these teams were growing and succeeding, and how other teams in other parts of the organization or in other companies were not growing, were not succeeding, I tried to understand what were the differences, what was working and what was not. So I came up with a series of characteristics that are less obvious in this working environment. Often companies don't talk about them. For instance, the power of kindness, respect, optimism, curiosity, a series of, and there are many more, but especially kindness, optimism, and curiosity somehow synthesize so many of the others. Curiosity is what gets you out of your comfort zone and push you to connect with people that are different from you, because you know that in that difference, in that diversity, there is the precious gift of knowledge, of a different perspective. Curiosity makes you travel, read books, connecting with any kind of experience, always thinking, what can I learn out of that experience? So curiosity for us, when we look at our organization, our designers in PepsiCo, is a key driver for growth within the organization. It's very simply and very pragmatically, if you're a graphic designer, it's that curiosity that pushes you to learn the world of digital, the world of industrial design, the world of fashion, interior, that is so important, when you are a designer in a company like this. But beyond that, is the curiosity that pushes you to see your marketing leaders, your finance leaders, your engineers and scientists in the company as mentors, as professors, as opportunity to grow and learn. Optimism is super important. If we try to change anything, by definition, we're gonna face roadblocks and challenges and difficulties. And if we don't have an optimistic mind, if we don't see the glass half full, we're gonna give up sooner or later. Innovation is a challenge every single day. And so you need a kind of optimistic view on the world. Now, some of it is natural. You're born, eventually some of us are born more optimistic than others. But there are also other ways, this is true for any characteristic of the unicorns, to practice that optimism. When I face a challenge in front of me and I'm like, wow, what do I do now? It's so difficult. I try to step back. And first of all, I try to remember the dream, where I'm going. And then I try, and this is something that I learned later in life, to look back and appreciate with full mindfulness the progress, where I came from. And then I try to remember the difficulties I faced in the past and how those difficulties made me a better designer, a better leader, most of the time a better person. And so I'm like, okay, now I see everything in perspective. That difficulty of today is just a step on the journey. And by the way, right now it's tough, but I know that it's gonna make me a better something, person, leader, So this is, I think, so important because over the years, I hire people who are doing amazing things, great designers, great strategists, but they didn't have that optimistic view on the world. And so they were moving things and doing and having progresses, but they were not appreciating that, and they were demoralized by that. And then finally, kindness, to close. This is so important. And yet, in these companies, often they tell us that kindness is weakness, is a vulnerability. And instead, today especially, is more important than ever. Let me give you a few examples. If you are surrounded by people that are not kind, that are not nice to you in your working environment, what do? You go to work from 9 to 5, and then you rush home as fast as possible. You don't want to see them around. But if you're surrounded by people that are nice to you, you're going to spend extra time with them. It could be a meal, a drink, a dinner, a lunch. And in that extra time, that quality time, is when you build those amazing bonds and synergies that will help you the week later or the month after, when you will face the roadblocks, the challenges in your project, in your business, or even your personal ones. That by definition, you will take those personal difficulties and challenges also at work. So you want people there together as a company, as a business leader. You want people that are there together to help each other. If you are afraid that somebody can stab you in your back, that can betray you because they're not nice to you, they're not kind to you, what do? A series of activities to protect yourself and to protect eventually your team as well. Well, those activities are totally unnecessary for the company. They are redundant. Now multiply the activities of each of these individuals and these teams for the number of people in your company. In my case, it's hundreds of thousands of people. And you realize the lack of productivity that this lack of kindness is generating. But it's totally invisible. Nobody talks about it. You talk about productivity when you talk about cutting costs, cutting people eventually, and unfortunately, or optimizing processes. And you don't talk about investing in kindness to increase productivity. And it's so powerful. And now, why is it indispensable today more than ever? Because in the past, these companies were rich. They had those barriers to entry, a very stable competitive scenario. So they had the opportunity, the luxury, but they had the luxury of being inefficient eventually. Today, any company knows that you need to be hyper-productive, hyper-efficient. And so you need to identify all the areas of inefficiencies, and lack of kindness is such a driver of inefficiency. Let me tell you just one final story. It's something that happened to me very recently. I was at a conference in Boston, and the head of design of a big corporation, now retired, was talking about an experience he had. He was on stage, I was in the audience. This is the story. He joined this big company that you all know. And
What's the first letter, Mauro?
But they're all very similar in these stories, I think. He goes in the office of this executive, of this business leader, and he starts to pitch design and explain everything he wants to do and everything. And he sees the guy becoming more and more rigid. And at a certain point, he takes his fist and boom, on the table. And he's like, I don't care about this design thinking and design. What I care about is to grow the business and being profitable. So you're just wasting my time. Please, just go. So the guy goes out and he thinks about what happened. And then the lesson that he was sharing with the audience was that he realized that he was just talking in the wrong way to this person. He was not using the right language. He was not talking about the connection between design and business. He was not essentially talking about something that was meaningful to the audience. So his message was, I didn't realize that I was using the wrong language. I changed my language. I went back, after a few weeks, I explained what I was trying to do in a different way, and all of a sudden, we built an amazing partnership, and everything went well, and he became the best co-conspirator inside that organization.
There's a great quote, which is, speaking to an audience without understanding their needs is like starting a love letter to whom it may concern. Exactly, I love that. I love that.
Now, that was the message. I was there, like you now, in the audience. I raised my hand. I could, and it was not even Q&A. I just had to raise my hand, intervene. And I told him, this is great, and you're right, and we need empathy, we need to be polyglot and talk different languages, but we need to stop endorsing those kind of behaviors.
Totally.
The fact that a guy didn't understand your diversity, was not open-minded enough to understand where you are coming from, the behavior, the lack of kindness in throwing you out of the door is something we cannot accept anymore. And we need to condemn every time that happens. Now, we need to do it for ethical reasons, because we should have done forever, because it's not okay, it's not right. But forget even that, because unfortunately often this is not enough. And we have been learning in these companies for so many years and reading books and looking at, listening to people at conferences, that actually eventually you need to be a little bit tough on people. And, the sharks are the one that win. We have so many CEOs that have been, talking about this for a while. The reality is that today, talking about the lack of productivity, that kind of behavior is totally unproductive and ineffective. Now imagine if that design guy was not smart enough to go back and change language. Well, the business leader essentially was trashing for his own company the opportunity of embracing design and drive profitable growth, by the way, just because of lack of kindness, and lack of empathy. So there is a financial implication in lack of kindness and lack of empathy.
So there's a figure, this is an extraordinary figure. The cost of lack of engagement and absenteeism in the United States of America is $263 billion a year. That's because people aren't happy at their work.
What about Europe?
What about Europe? I don't know the figure for Europe. If anybody has the answer, please put up your hand.
No, but I'm asking for a reason. There is an article that I read this morning. It just popped in my feed in Instagram. I don't remember where it's from. It may be from Fortune, but and essentially was talking about, I don't even remember the name of the business leader. I was not expecting to talk about this on stage right now, but there was this business leader saying that essentially Europeans are not as successful as Americans in business because of the work ethic in Europe. And it was the lack of work ethic, essentially. And so immediately, even before reading the comments, I was thinking, yeah, but in general, Europeans are more happy than Americans, right? The level of anxiety there is in America, and the performance. Since you are a kid, you need to do all kind of exams to get to school when you're 2 years old. I'm not joking, 2 years old, you have the test to enter school. I'm 2 years old. But there is always this pressure. Level of anxiety is to the stars. And so then I read the comment, and everybody was, attacking and challenging this idea. What is more important? The work ethic and the success of your business, or the happiness of the society? And the fact that you're not even realizing this, how dangerous it is, how bad it is.
I had a conversation recently with a woman. She's actually the deputy mayor of Reykjavik, and she has licenses for Pizza Hut in Iceland and in Finland. And she said in Finland, where they have implemented the Work-Life Balance Act, shorter working days, the productivity and profits are greater. So, this is bottom line stuff for anybody who's totally driven by the bottom line in the audience. It's really important. It's really important. Mauro, I think we have to do the audience the service of opening up the floor. So please, I'm sure you all have lots of questions. Who would like to start the ball rolling? We have a hand here. It's the first one I've seen. I'll come back to you.
Hi, Ellen Gully from Medicom. Thank you. I absolutely loved your contribution. Could I just ask you, the culture and the values that you were talking about were internal to an organisation? What Medicoms does is it looks at the brand values of the consumer and says, this is the culture that's out there that your company needs to reflect. So I wonder if you would just speak a little bit about how you look outside and bring the values that are important ultimately to the brand user back into that culture of your organisation.
This is a great question. Also because those values are evolving a lot in the past few years. And also because there is often a disconnection between the perceived values, what we hear in social media, and all the listening that we do, and the data we have, the superficial data of what appears to be the values. And then what is the reality, looking at the consumers' behaviors and purchasing habits and what they actually are buying and what they are doing. There is often a disconnection between what they say and what they do. And so what we try to do is, through data, understand both what is the superficial layer of perception and what is instead exactly what drives society. Often the superficial layer, though, is an ambition, is where society want to go, but it's not reflecting the numbers. And this is the struggle that these companies have. They try to do the right thing, but there is often not yet enough money and scale associated to the right thing. And so there is always that tension of trying to even educate consumers, people out there, I like to call them people, in buying things in a different way, on behaving in a different way. So that's the first part of the answer. We were talking about sustainability, and then I didn't even touch on that. You know, I joined PepsiCo, and I was like, wow, you know, I'm gonna really help this company, this industry be more sustainable. There is a CEO in Ranui that was really invested in this, and the CEO today, Ramon Laguarta, even more. You know, there is a big focus on this, and it's very authentic. I tell you that it's really, really real. The problem is the world and the society and the industry, and the fact that, for instance, we started to develop, first of all, sustainability. The most sustainable product is the product that you don't produce. Because the moment you start to produce anything, even the most sustainable product that you are producing, you are having a negative impact on the environment. Just in the energy you use to produce it, the carbon footprint when you transport it. This mission implies energy. Use implies often consumption of energy. So all of this is negative for the world. So the first thing we should do is to reuse stuff, from food and beverage packaging all the way to fashion and anything else. Why do we need to buy a phone every year or every 2 years? All of this needs to change. So the reuse is the first solution to everything. Then, yes, you need to look at the materials that we use, how recyclable they are. But again, the material is a component of the life cycle that you need to consider the full cycle. So there is this attack on plastic. For clarity, companies like PepsiCo, Nestlé, Coca-Cola, none of them produce plastic. They buy plastic from other companies. They buy aluminum, they buy glass. What they produce and they make money on is the concentrate, is the beverage that goes inside the thing. So if they could sell you beverage without anything, it would be very profitable and ideal. They didn't need to spend money on a packaging. Just for clarity, there is even this misunderstanding that there is any kind of interest in this company to sell plastic. But going back to plastic, actually, recycled plastic, if there was enough quantity in the supply chain of recycled plastic, it would be a better solution than aluminum and glass, because aluminum and glass, they require much more energy in production and they have a higher carbon footprint. Why I'm mentioning all this information? Because the challenge that we had over the years was to understand not just how to design the right alternative solutions. We have so many products. We bought for billions of dollars SodaStream, that is a system that as a reusable bottle and use the water from your faucet. More sustainable than that. We created a series of machines that are all about customization of drinks with reusable bottles. We have for Gatorade, a series of systems that reuse bottles. So we have many solutions, but people are not buying enough of these things. And so the challenge is how to make sure that no matter what you read in social media, no matter the perception, the way everybody wants this company to be more sustainable, the reality is that when they are, people are not embracing those kind of things. And so how to work in a full ecosystem with governments, with the media, with people out there, and then, yes, there are the companies, obviously, to create different kind of behaviors, to change those behaviors. As designers, we're also thinking, okay, I create a solution that is more sustainable, but implies a lack of convenience, the lack of convenience of carrying a bottle with you and not just buying a bottle and throwing away when you finish using it. So how can you offer new advantages, new values, new benefits in that system to your end user? For instance, in the case of Gatorade or SodaStream Professional, you can customize your drinks. You buy the reusable bottle, and then that's the only way to customize your drinks, something that you wouldn't have if you buy a normal bottle out there. So this is the first part of the answer is people, they tell you certain things, they behave in a different way. Our role is to understand the difference between the two dimensions and then understand how to help them evolving towards those ambitions, those dreams, and those kind of behaviors. The other thing is that those ambitions are usually, like we talk about sustainability, health and wellness, the importance of diversity, all these different values, the more, and this is probably the more direct answer to your question, the more you take them in, you embrace them, and the more they're part of the culture of your company. And if you have in your company people that are creators, that are innovators, and embrace those kind of values, they will reflect those values in the way they create products, brands, services, solutions. So this is so important to understand those behaviors. But I started, diverging a little bit because often there is a disconnection between the ambition of what you read out there and what is really happening in reality.
In human behavior.
Yes.
Yeah. We're at an hour now, so we're kind of going to have to wrap it up. So we might do a few quick fire Q&A. Hillary, you had a question.
Hi. Hillary Kenna. I'm a lecturer here in design in IADT. Thank you very much for your very engaging and passionate conversation about design and humans. You spoke there about sustainability, so I wanted to ask you, is the next biggest challenge of your career about the love of the planet and about making humans love the planet? And, I think, as a design educator, I think that we've moved beyond human-centered design, and I think we're moving to human and planet-centered design. So I want to know, I suppose, for your future career and the struggles with all of the kind of the growth is kind of, I suppose, the antithesis to sustainability. So what about design for degrowth? What about design for human behavior change? And all the innovations that go with new materials and new kind of practices to make your products that are sustainable?
Look, there are three main challenges or opportunities in my journey in a company like PepsiCo. One is sustainability, the other one is health and wellness, personalization, and then technology as an enabler of all of this. When talking about sustainability, there is a chapter in the book that talks about the difference between human centricity and environment centricity. Because over the years, I was talking about human centricity, and many people were like, enough with this human centricity, we need to focus on the planet and the environment. We need environment centricity. And I was like, I don't get it. I just don't understand that. Because if you're really human-centered, by definition, you're going to respect the environment. If you don't respect the environment, you're not human-centered. So in the book, I make an example to make it very, very clear. Let's say that the focus of the human centricity is your kid. I have a 7-month-old daughter today, 22nd, today she's 7 months. I look at her. If I design for her, I will never destroy the bedroom where she sleeps, the house where she lives, the garden where she plays, our 2 little dogs she plays with. So if you're seriously human-centered, obviously you're going to respect the environment where these humans live. If you don't, that's not human centricity, because you know that you're going to damage those humans. Putting the short-term benefits of these humans in front of anything else is not being human-centered. It's like giving your kids hundreds of candies in a day because the kid wants them, and you're going to kill the kid. You don't want to do that. So that's the starting point. But I understand the point you are making. Yes, the planet is very, very important. And I think, first of all, I entered the PepsiCo 10 years ago. For me, it was fascinating to see the shift in the entire industry, in the shift of attention towards sustainability. When Indra Nooyi, our former CEO, was talking about sustainability, it was really visionary. It was before the time, and not really many people were talking about that at that level in those companies. Today, it's pretty common for CEOs to talk about this. There is a serious investment on this, and I think it's also driven by the fact, those lack of barriers to entry or barriers to entry are going down. The fact that if you're not sustainable, well, in the past, your competitor was not sustainable and the other competitor was not sustainable. It was the nature of the industry. Today, the new startups are entering exactly from there. They have everything you have and they're sustainable. So I think it's a magic moment to change things. Things are going to change. The problem is how fast. We need to move faster. And I think it's a mix of visionary leaders in companies, policies. You need that. They are an amazing accelerator, but they need to be done in the right way. They need to be done without killing entire industries, without pushing companies to collapse or close, industries. They need to be done in the long run. And this is probably the problem that often we have in politics, that is so short term sided. We need a plan. We need to move in the right direction. But yes, the most ambassadors we have of this kind of value. What I tell students coming out of school, often, you are in school, you study all these values, they teach you all these things, and then you look at the big corporations and you're like, okay, I'm gonna fight you with my startup or What I tell them is join these companies, change things from within. The more people we have within PepsiCo that are passionate about sustainability, the more in the day-to-day conversations we can change things. So that's the message. I did more for sustainability through the scale of PepsiCo than anything I could have done ever with my own startup outside of PepsiCo.
Thanks, Mauro. Louise, thank you for making this happen. You were the conduit for this event, so thank you very much. And you have a question.
I have a question, yeah. My question is more around, your experience, Mauro, working under Indra, and you mentioned like sharks and you mentioned kindness, and I think what you're kind of saying maybe is more about the masculine versus feminine energy in the business world, right? And I think we both, male and female, have the capacity for both, okay? But I'd like to hear you speak a little bit about how you've witnessed that feminine energy or that kindness, maybe in a female leader or maybe a male, and how you think women can more step into owning and, I suppose, using that power of kindness without being afraid of being seen to be weak in the business world.
You're so right. I mean, kindness is transcend any gender, but usually is more of a feminine woman kind of characteristic, and therefore when women arrive to certain positions, they feel the pressure of society of hiding, that characteristic. And you see this happening so many times. You mentioned Indra. Indra, for me, has been an amazing, amazing example of women leadership. She was a leader transcending any gender, transcending anything. The fact that, by the way, she was a woman and she's also Indian, so a woman of color. But she was, before anything else, a leader, no matter anything else. But she was able to leverage her diversity, so for instance, her being a woman, in the right moment, in the right occasions, in the right way. I have multiple stories, that direct experiences of this. One is, for instance, she used to write letters to the parents of some of the executives working for her. And these letters were written by a mother to another mother. It was addressed to both parents, but it was obviously written by a mother to another mother. So she wrote, and she will find the addresses of the parents without the person knowing. So she found the address of my parents, and she wrote a beautiful letter to my mom and my dad, thanking them for the education that they gave me and for the gift of giving me to PepsiCo. I remember my mom, like, in tears reading that letter. The first time and so she...
That is extraordinary, isn't it?
Amazing, amazing. And she will build, this is something that came from her heart, but was also very strategic. She was building a loyalty for the company, for the full family, not just... And I remember when she was so caring, and so one day we were in Milan for Milan Design Week. We were having a big event. She came to give a speech, and my parents came. And my parents were totally out of place in these design environments. You could see that they didn't belong. And I was not there in the moment. And essentially, they meet Indra. And my mom and my father don't speak English. So even for the letter, they had to go online and translate it and everything. And Indra obviously doesn't speak Italian, but they saw each other, and my mom again started to cry, and they hugged. They both hugged. But imagine the bond. I mean, this is the CEO of a corporation, and this is the mother of one of the executives. And there was a bond because of the letter, written in a unique way. Now, yes, I think I thought over the years I should do it too. Yes, I can do it, but there was something, you know, a mother writing to another mother is a nuance that is, and this is an example of, you know,
But I wonder, should we explode that though as well? You know, if we're talking about men and women being able to really show this feminine quality, I think you should write the letters.
No, I agree, and I will be totally comfortable doing it because anyway, I have this feminine, you know, thing inside me. You know, I am a loving kind of person. You know, I
get that.
But there are many other people that eventually are not, you know, in the way. But here we're talking about. You said at the beginning, anybody can be kind.
Sure.
We're talking about diversity of kindness and embracing your diversity in a purposeful way. This is the meaning of, you know, it doesn't mean that a man cannot be kind, but the way, I tell you another story that for me is very touching. I was in a super difficult moment of my life. I was in the middle of a divorce, and that specific week, it was the summer of 2015, I was like under a train, like in full depression. And it was very weird for me because I've never had any kind of problem of depression in my entire life. Super optimistic. I thought that this was something that would never ever touch me, you know, in my life. And instead, I lost control and I was in the depths of this. And so, by coincidence, exactly that week, there was strategic planning of PepsiCo, something we do once a year, from Monday to Friday, from the morning until the evening. You are there with the CEO, the top executives of the company, reviewing the plans for the next 5 years. So I had to be there. And so we're about 20 in the room. Indra in this horseshoe table, she was there at the center. I was on the side, so not totally visible to her, and I was like a ghost. And I lost 10 kilos just the week before, literally like this, not sleeping or anything. And so the meeting starts 8 a.m. By 10 a.m., there is a first break, and she looks at me, she comes to me, and she's like, Mauro, what's going on? And I don't answer. And she realized that something is not right, and she's like, come with me. And she brings me to her office, and that's where she told me, tell me what's going on, and I was not comfortable answering. And then she's like, okay, look at me as if I was your mother, or, you know, or your sister, whatever. But
She is good.
and I burst in tears. I told her everything was happening, and she was like, just take time off, go, take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, go. And I told her, no, Indra, I need to come to work. I need to keep busy and everything. But I tell you, I'm totally gone with my mind right now. She's like, okay, do whatever you want. After that, she's been checking on me every day. I mean, this is a person with 300,000 employees, you know, in the company. And yes, I'm one of, you know, the executives, but there are many other executives. I'm not the only one. And she's busy, you know, as CEO of a company like this. So texting and checking, and you could feel the love. Now, in all of this, all the men in the room, including the person I was reporting directly to, none of them realized what was happening. Now, I'm not saying that a man is not able to feel it, right? I'm not saying that. But in that specific moment, the extreme sensitivity of a woman, and then using the fact that she was a woman with me in the moment to push me to open up, because she knew that you are in a professional environment. It was not easy for me to really say what was happening. And after that, she's been so, I think she also saw
vulnerability.
Yes, she saw that created a bond between me and her. It was amazing, and still today, you know, we are in touch. We're doing this. We are presenting the book in New York, the 15th of December. She came to. She lives in Connecticut. She came all the way to New York, 1 hour and a half driving to meet my baby, with a beautiful present for her. I mean, there is a connection. But I think she saw also, you know, that vulnerability and that care and that love and yes, and I think she understood that vulnerability that made me weak in that moment was also what made me strong in other moments inside the company. So that's another thing. Instead of seeing something like this, like, this is not really the right leader I want to have in my company, she understood that actually was the value, you know, a value. In the moment, yes, I was inefficient for the company, but there was a value.
You're human.
You know, yeah.
Who do I look to see if we've time for one more question? Or We have one question here. Hi, Aileen. How are you? Apparently, I look to Aileen to see if you have time for one more question.
Yes, Aileen Dempsey, good morning. Thank you, Sonya, and thank you, Mauro. It's a really quick question, and it's on the topic of kindness again. It's a good number of years since I first heard you talking about that when you were talking about scaling, actually in Boston as well, talking about scaling the Pepsi team from New York, and it was really, you know, a success, a starting success at the time, and the scaling. And you were talking about building a team, and a key aspect you talked about at the time was kindness, and it is a theme throughout the book, and you've talked about it a lot this morning. But what I just want to ask you is, when you're interviewing and in the interview process and in the recruitment process, how at that stage do you can you identify kindness? Because it is, I would say, a tricky one at that stage, and I would just be really interested to hear any insights that you might have or that you could share with us on that one.
Yeah, I
Thank
wish
you.
I had an answer because it's so insanely difficult. I don't think, I mean, you need to trust a little bit your gut, but the reality is that I made many mistakes over the years anyway. So the only strategy that I use is, first of all, to embody that kindness.
And if they bring sweets.
And yes, if they bring a lot of gifts, then it's like they're very kind. No, but it's to embody that and make sure you talk about this. So I talk about this in conferences, in social media. I've read a book about this everywhere. So first of all, the people coming to you, they know that you want that. I make sure that also the recruiters know about this. And usually the recruiters are there exposed to these people. They know them over years. So they know already that that's filter number one. So that's usually the strategy I use, that they filter themselves out. But sometimes they get in anyway. And so it's important to make sure that you keep talking about this within your organization as well, that you reward people that have that kind of behavior, that you don't reward, and they're quite the opposite, the people that don't. And sooner or later, they get out by themselves because they don't find the right...
There's no oxygen for them.
Yes, exactly. So,
fantastic.
But I don't have a specific way of recognizing them in a 1-hour conversation. If anybody does, please let me know.
Are we happy to wrap up, President? Mauro, what can I say? You're so generous, you're so open, and you've given us such wisdom and insight through your book and through your conversation today. Ladies and gentlemen, Mauro Porcini.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sonya. Thanks, everybody.